Hello, here's another brief message regarding the project. I just wanted to say a couple of things, or those of you that are working on the body of the essay. Um, Now that you have a thesis, you have an introduction, you can really move forward and working and thinking about the body of the essay, the full essay essentially. Um, what's interesting about the essay is that it does a couple of things. Number one, I think the introduction and conclusions can deal with more general information, right? Broader information, the context, the revolution, all that kind of stuff. Um, Constitution, the complications of the new nation, whatever you're setting up. The body of the essay really has to be more specific, although it's the longest part. This is really where you're getting specific and thinking about a couple of things. Number one, I want you to think about the 2 or 3 topics or themes that you plan to specifically discuss in this essay. Look back at the original handout for some ideas. Think about your main characters and what topics or themes you think come up in their experiences that help you answer these main questions about the revolution, whether or not it's a contradiction. But you really don't have a lot of time and space to talk about everything. So you have to, by this point, know the 2 or 3 specific things you plan to discuss and do it in this part. Right? Your thesis tells your reader what you're going to do. Your conclusion tells your reader what you did. So the body of the essay has to actually do it. Your main character should make an appearance at some point in this body, even though some of you may have used your main characters in your intro. You can speak through them. You can use them to help you prove your argument about the revolution. So you want to analyze the major factors in the revolution or the formation of the country, right? You want to prove your point and analyze your points in this part. Some key themes might include things like race, class, gender, right? Depending on your main character, if your character is male or female or what have you, maybe gender comes in more. So think about, your specific argument in this position. Think about how your main character helps you demonstrate your point. That's part of the how part of that thesis that you're actually doing now. That's why I was pushing you to be so specific in your thesis to tell me why it's significant and how you plan to prove it, right? How you plan to demonstrate it in this paper, because once you have the how, the 2 or 3 things you think you're going to specifically talk about, then all you have to do is actually do it, right? Take those 2 or 3 things and talk about them in the body of the essay. In addition, there's one other thing that the body of the essay should touch on. I'm gonna give you a term that is really kind of a graduate school history term, but it's really a simple idea. The term is historiography. Historiography. You'll notice in the initial outline it mentions historiography, which is basically a brief review of your sources, right? A brief review of your sources. What historiography really means, a kind of longer definition of it, is the way history has been written and interpreted over time, right? Various perspectives that we've talked about. What I often talk about in class when we meet in person is how historians disagree with each other, often, depending on their own backgrounds, depending on their own sources, depending on what questions they're asking, how historical interpretations may change over time. It's not that one is wrong and one is right. Often we learn new information or have new sources or can build on the work of others. So what I want you to do is to think specifically about your sources and how they help you to arrive at your argument. Now remember, you started off with a hypothesis, a tentative one. This is what I think I'm going to find. Now after you've done all this research, you may change your opinion about certain things, right? So your sources are really important. You have more than enough sources to draw from. In fact, you can't talk about everything because there's so much, but you're the one that's choosing which ones are most useful for you. And so I want you to tell me as your reader about the sources you've chosen, literally in the paper, right? Sometimes if you're reading a book, there'll be footnotes, right? And the author will tell you that their perspective was influenced by reading this book or watching this film and that film. You're kind of doing the same thing, but you're mentioning something about these sources specifically in the body of your essay. Right, so there should be a section that is your historiography section or your review of the sources kind of section. I want you to actually write that in the paper. Sometimes we don't put it in the paper, we just put it in the footnotes. This time I want you to actually mention something about how your sources helped you to arrive and prove your argument. So that's what that means. Go back to the original handout and you'll see that mentioned specifically. So the body of the essay really does two things. You prove your argument and you tell me kind of how you arrived there using the sources you've chosen. All right, so keep that in mind as you're continuing to work on the body of the essay.